All right, thank you. Good evening. Gosh, this is kind of loud. All right, it is 7:01 on Tuesday, October 10th, 2023, and I now call to order the 2125th regular meeting of the City of College Place City Council. Sherry, will you please take roll call?
Mayor Hernandez,
Present.
Councilmember Jessup,
Present.
Councilmember Cleveland,
Present.
Councilmember Espinoza,
Present.
Councilmember Peterson,
Present.
Councilmember Williams,
Present.
Councilmember Sherman,
Present.
Councilmember Boyle.
Present.
We do have a quorum.
Excellent. Full house. All right, will you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. It's now time for public comment. Sherry, did anyone submit a comment in advance?
I did not receive any comments.
Okay, and we have no one here live in the audience. Is there anyone connected to us virtually?
We have 2 attendees.
Okay, so if anyone in a virtual attendance would like to speak, please raise your hand now. If you're connected by phone, *9 will raise your hand. All right, so then we're going to continue moving on to the consent agenda, which consists of the agenda for tonight, October 10th, 2023, the council meeting minutes for September 26, 2023, and the council workshop minutes from October 3rd, 2023. Are there any items any member of the council would like removed from the consent agenda at this time?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Perfect. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion is passed. Thank you. Let's move right along. Presentations. We have 2 presentations on the agenda tonight. First is a public briefing of the ecology funded water projects by Mr. Fazzari. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I have a brief PowerPoint presentation here to go through. This is in regards to 2 of the wastewater collection system projects that we have ongoing. This has been presented to the council several times, as well as to the Utility Commission. But ecology funding has some specific requirements for a public meeting to make sure that the public is well aware of the project as well. So that is the purpose of this presentation. And so here on the agenda, here are just a few things that I'll be sharing with you over the next 10 minutes or so. A quick description of the projects, a summary of some of the alternatives to the projects, how the projects are funded and what the rate impacts are from the 2 projects, some of the cumulative impacts to some of the homeowners in the vicinities of the projects, and then a summary of the schedule. So next slide, please. And next slide, please. Great, thank you. So the first of the 2 projects is what we're referring to as the cured-in-place piping project. Cured-in-place piping is a trenchless sewer pipe rehabilitation method. And so this project is funded by the new ecology loan and grant. It adds up to about 15,000 linear feet of existing sanitary sewer pipe within the city that will be rehabilitated with this trenchless technology. The locations for all of the pipes were identified in the general sewer plan. If you recall, the general sewer plan was a master planning document for the sewer collection system that was completed a few years ago, where we sat down with city staff and identified all of the areas of the sewer collection system that they have to routinely visit because of operations and maintenance issues, or our old materials, or our areas where we felt like there could be a lot of groundwater infiltration into the collection system. So those were all identified in that general sewer plan, and we had identified about 10 years worth of projects to be slowly rehabilitated a year at a time over the next decade. But we came across some great funding through the Department of Ecology, and we're doing about 10 years worth of projects in 1 year. So that's why there's that 15,000 linear foot quantity for this project. Next slide, please. And so here's a site plan of that cured in place piping project. All of the areas highlighted in yellow are all of the areas of pipelines that we'll be doing this cured in place piping in the coming year. The area highlighted in orange is the second project we'll be talking about tonight, and that's the Lift Station 5 project. But you can see from the yellow highlighted areas, the pipelines are located, they're pretty much scattered throughout the city. Next slide, please. So for this cured in place piping project, there are a few different alternatives besides the project that we're deciding to execute. One of them is a do nothing alternative. Basically, if we do nothing, if we don't line these sewer pipes, there will be ongoing maintenance costs. As I mentioned, the operations and maintenance crews need to visit these pipes fairly often to keep them clean and flowing. And also, I mentioned that there's infiltration likely coming in through the collection system, which means that there's a lot of clean groundwater entering the sewer system and going down to your wastewater treatment plant. And so that's an increased cost on the wastewater treatment plant. So if we do nothing, likely continue to have a lot of maintenance on these sewer pipes and a lot more infiltration at your wastewater treatment plant. Another alternative to the cured in place piping would be traditional excavation of the pipelines, which is obviously which is a lot more expensive, easily double the cost of the trenchless rehab. And it would also be a lot more of a nuisance during construction to some of the residents as well. So that's why we landed on that cured in place piping alternative for this pipe rehab option. So the second project here is the Lift Station number 5 project. You can see from this photo, Lift Station number 5 is right in the middle of a sidewalk. I'm not exactly sure why anybody thought this was a good location for it, but it's obviously a pedestrian impediment. It's also a real pain for the operations and maintenance crew because it's a confined space and all the electrical equipment is below ground. They always need to send 2 people out to visit this lift station every time. And also, this lift station does not have backup power. So in the case of a power outage, we're really relying on power to get restored before this pump can be operational again. So this was a key project for replacement. This also is funded by the combination of the ecology loan and grant, and the design phase of this lift station was also funded by a Public Works Trust Fund loan. The overall project will involve abandoning this existing lift station and then constructing a new one on an adjacent parcel. This is located on Southwest First Street. Also, because there will be some piping associated with routing sewage from this existing lift station location to the new lift station location, Southwest First Street, there'll be a lot of excavation in the roadway that'll be tore up for doing a lot of pipeline installation. And so we decided to take this opportunity to also add some stormwater improvements on Southwest First Street, as well as adding some sidewalks on Southwest First Street. Next slide, please. And so this is an overall view of the project area. So this is Southwest First Street. And you can see, I'm not sure if you can quite see the leader that points to where the location of the existing lift station is. It's on towards the left-hand side of the screen. Yeah, go to the previous slide, please. Yeah. And then you can see the new parcel where we'll be locating the new lift station is on the south side of First Street, about halfway down the project area. And that's a new parcel. That's a parcel that the city recently acquired. Spent about the last year or so acquiring that parcel from the landowner. And so that will be the new location for the lift station project. And you can see in the gray areas, Those are all areas where we'll be adding sidewalks on both sides of Southwest First Street. And then the black areas are areas where we will go ahead and overlay and restore the pavement on that road. So it'll be all brand new, freshly paved surface on Southwest First Street as part of this project. Next slide, please. This next one focuses in a little bit more on that lift station site itself. And so adjacent to Southwest First Street, along the frontage of that new parcel that the city purchased, there will be some landscaping improvements there to improve the aesthetics there. And then the site itself will be fenced for some security. That square area will be a stormwater pond near the front part of the parcel. And then on the south end of the parcel is where the new lift station will be located. So the lift station itself will be completely below ground. So all the pumps and piping will be below ground. And there's a valve pit that will be below ground as well. The only infrastructure that'll really be visible above ground will be a backup power generator so that we have backup power at the lift station, and the electrical panel for all of the pumps, electrical and controls equipment. Next slide, please. Before this Lift Station 5 project, there are a few different alternatives. One is do nothing. Then, as I mentioned before, that pedestrian obstruction would remain in the sidewalk, and there would continue to be reliability issues with this lift station in terms of no backup power and it being a bit of a pain for the operations staff to visit and work on. We could have picked a different location for the new lift station site. And in fact, we did approach the property directly across the street, but the homeowner wasn't willing to sell the property. So we moved down the block a few parcels, and that homeowner was very easy to work with and was willing to sell the property to the city. So that made that a good transaction. Another alternative we could have considered for this Lift Station 5 project was to just simply do the lift station improvements and not include the sidewalk and storm improvements. But we felt like there was a good economy of scale to do this work while the road was already being excavated and there are already some disruptions to the public. So we decided it was good to go ahead and include the sidewalk and storm improvements along with this project at the same time. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of the funding for the project. Council's seen this before. This is the $26 million funding package we recently received from Ecology. Highlighted in red boxes, the two projects that we're talking about today. So the first three rows in that upper red box are this collection system rehabilitation project. So the first row being the design, the second one being the construction, and then the third one being the construction management. So JUB is currently performing the design phase right now. We're expecting to go out to add next year, and so the construction cost will be about $2 million, 1.9 shown there in the table. And then JUB will also help with construction management to make sure the project's built correctly. So all in all, it's a little over $2 million project. Half of it will be covered by a low interest loan and half of it by grant funding. So that was a really generous funding package from Ecology to cover half of the project with grant monies. The second red box down below is the Lift Station number 5 project. And so the design is being covered by a Public Works Trust Fund loan, but the construction and the construction management will be also partially funded by Ecology. Again, 50% grant and 50% loan for that project as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of rate impacts, the loan is a 20-year payback with a low interest rate, about 1.4%. The finance director did do a rate model update in 2022 and did include the financing and paying back this loan as part of this $26 million funding package in that rate model update. And so the programmed rate increases that came out of that were 3% per year through the year 2032 and then 2% thereafter. So that is the net rate impact of this entire $26 million project, which is not only these two collection system projects, but also the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. Next slide, please. So in terms of cumulative impacts or impacts during construction, for the cured in place piping project, the homeowners whose services are connected to the pipes that will be rehabilitated will be asked not to discharge sewage that day while the pipe rehabs is being constructed. So there will be a bit of an impact, disruption to sewer service, but just for one day for each homeowner that is along this project area. And there will be some minor traffic control so that they can access some of the manholes in the streets. One of the first things that this contractor will do is do a camera survey of all the pipes to make sure that they won't have to do any excavation before they do the trenchless rehab. In some cases, there are some offset pipe joints or some spot repairs that need to be made, and there will be some excavation associated with those, but that'll be determined once we get a contractor on board. Next
Alex?
slide. Yeah.
We have Councilmember Peterson has a question.
Sure.
So looking at the slide, so no showers, no discharge that day, right?
Correct. Yeah, it'll be during normal working hours. So it'd typically be like from a 8 to 5 period.
Okay. I mean, will the city, I guess this, here we go. I guess the city could put out some temporary porta potties in those areas during that time, or what are your thoughts?
Well, we weren't planning on that. It's pretty customary for infrastructure projects in neighborhoods to have disruptions in service for a day or two during construction. We could certainly look at putting up some porta potties if you want. That's something that we could add into the bidding documents and ask the contractor to provide.
Yeah, just something to think about. I mean, one other quick question, and I know this, I think I know the answer before I ask this question, but some of those homeowners may have sewage lines going to their houses that are needing to be repaired, replaced. And I know they don't, is this a good time for them to contact that contractor, or would that be such a diversion that's a bad idea?
Well, yeah.
This could be run to the house, correct? If it needed to be replaced.
Last part again.
I'm sorry, this could be ran up to the house while they're doing the main street CIPP, right?
Well, not exactly. So this work is trenchless pipe rehab, and
Right.
generally it's a pretty specialized contractor that does this type of work. Essentially, the construction sequence will be they will access the existing pipe through one of the existing manholes in the street, and they will run basically resin impregnated stock down the manhole and down the pipe run, and they will fish it back up through a manhole on the other end, and they'll blow that stock up and harden it, and it will basically form a liner of the existing pipe. These contractors generally don't do a lot of excavation. It's all trenchless rehab. However, I think there's an opportunity for the homeowners to contact the contractor and see if they would be willing to repair their service at the same time, especially since they'll be out of sewer service for a day anyways. But it would likely be a different type of contractor that they would talk about doing that kind of work. And these projects that we identified for this project, these 15,000 linear feet, are all areas where we're intending to make any changes to the sewer laterals. There are a few projects in the general sewer plan where it's believed that the laterals are in really poor condition and will need to be rehabilitated. And so those are projects we're going to tackle at a later date because they'll be a little bit more expensive and a little bit more associated with them. But the thought was that the laterals in these project areas were in pretty good shape and wouldn't need to be rehabilitated. And the trenchless rehab, they do offer it. It's mostly for pipes 8 inches in diameter and larger. It's really difficult to do for small diameter pipes.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. So next slide, please. In terms of impacts from the lift station number 5 project, there'll be a lot more impacts associated with this because there'll be a lot of more underground excavation associated with this project, a lot of underground pipelines that will be installed in Southwest First Street. Also, as part of the sidewalks project, there will be some new driveway approaches for all the driveways along Southwest First Street in the project vicinity. In addition, so that we have room for the sidewalks within the existing right-of-way, there will be some utilities, mailboxes and fences that will need to be relocated outside of the right-of-way to make room for the sidewalk. And we walked along with a city staff member this project area and visited with as many of the homeowners as we could over the course of 2 or 3 days to discuss the project with them, show them the location of the right-of-way, show them their utilities that might be affected by this project. And we're also going to be asking the contractor to fill out a form and have it signed by each property owner so that each property owner understands the work before it's done and also signs off on it after the work's completed to make sure it's restored to their satisfaction. And then one other impact from the Lift Station 5 project is there's an alleyway to Southwest Davis from First that we're gonna convert to be just a one-way alleyway as part of this project. Next slide, please. And so finally, the schedules. So the cured in place piping project is currently in design. We're anticipating that we'll bid it sometime late winter, early spring of 2024, and that construction project will occur throughout 2024. And then the lift station number 5 project, we finished our 90% design. It's currently being reviewed by the Department of Ecology. We're anticipating that we'll bid that later this fall, early winter, and then construction will be throughout 2024. So that's what I had to discuss about these 2 projects. Are there any other questions or comments?
Member Jessup?
Thank you for giving us a review. I know you had given us the full 10-year plan and then the grant money and such came in. Would you please remind me, how did you come to decide the pipes that you are doing?
Yeah, so we had a series. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, yeah, we had a series of meetings with the city staff. And so we had some maps printed off, and we identified some of the materials of the pipes. So we targeted a lot of the pipes that are concrete pipes. And we also had some information on the age of the pipes. So we tried to tackle the older pipes in the system as well. And then also sitting down with the city operations crew, getting their feedback on which parts of the system they have to routinely perform cleaning or operations and maintenance on. And also the parts of the system that they suspected were likely culprits of having a lot of groundwater infiltration into the system. So it was a lot of discussions and interviews with city staff to help identify these pipelines that we're targeting with this project.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Cleveland?
I had a question about the alleyway. You said it was going to be one way. Was that just during construction or permanently?
That would be permanent.
Okay. Have we gotten any feedback from the landowners in that area?
You know, I don't specifically recall. Robert, do you remember about discussions with the neighbors in that area?
I wasn't personally involved, but it's my understanding that our inspector and I think JEB staff, when they walked through the area, had some conversations with those staff, those property owners, and informed them that we were talking about it. I know right now we're calling it an alleyway. It's technically an extension of Southwest First Street, but it narrows down so significantly that there's not enough room for two-way traffic. And so
if you could go to slide number 7, please.
Yeah. The general flow of traffic follows this Southwest First. If you're heading east, you would just by nature turn to the north onto Evans Street. And so part of our design is helping with that flow and making the extension of Southwest First really feel more like an alley, like a side street. And so for safety reasons, it really didn't make sense to continue to make it a two-way street. I know the property owners have commented that Especially during, school drop-offs. There's traffic that tries to flow through there pretty quickly, and I think this will help slow traffic down as well.
Would it be prudent to maybe send out some letters and maybe solicit some feedback, at least maybe on the direction of the one-way street? Like, do they want it going east to west or west to east?
Yeah, we certainly could. The current plan was to make it one way to the west, which facilitated traffic into what would be a stop sign at that intersection. But Alex, if we changed that direction, do you have a feel for how that would impact our design?
I don't, I'm the water sewer guy, not the transportation guy. So I would have to defer to some of my transportation colleagues, but we could certainly discuss that and make it a point to follow up with some of the homeowners in some way to try and garner some feedback on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilmember Espinosa.
Yeah, Mr. Fasari, just quick question about the funding. So I want to make sure I understand clearly. The way that we're going to be paying for this project, half of it is the Department of Ecology grants, and the other half we're asking for a loan. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and the second question is this project baked into the $26 million wastewater plan, the overarching plan that we've been discussing as well?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And the payback of the loan portion of that $26 million project, which includes these two collection system projects and the wastewater treatment plant project, is what will result is being paid for with the 3% rate increases.
Councilmember Peterson.
A curiosity question. Have you guys identified any of the city sewers lines that are, there's a terminology for it. Is it tar paper and it's wood and it's bound? Do we have any of that's on a major that you've identified?
Not that I'm aware of. If we did, we would have targeted as part of this project. I think.
Right. I'm sure it would have been a target. I was just curious. I know that I've heard that there's areas of the city that may have that still in existence. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thanks.
That's Orangeburg, I think is what you're referring to. And it's usually we find it quite frequently on laterals going to residences, not in any of our mains.
Councilmember Williams.
Thank you for putting this all together. This is helpful. I have a couple of comments, mostly on comments of other council members, but I would suggest, I know quite a few people who would rather go hang out at a friend's house for a day than have a porta potty on their block because they're just really anti. So it might be helpful to reach out to the places where we're replacing the pipes and ask before we decide to put out porta potties, because they may not need them. And then secondly, as someone who does have to dabble in transportation sometimes, I would suspect that your transportation engineers are going to say that having it go that one-way stretch go east towards the east instead of the west will be a safety concern. And so I expect that it's more, this is a safety concern of the city street and the city has to do this. So.
Do you mean by going west instead of east?
Well, he said they're planning to go west. I think that's the correct direction.
Okay, because
if we try to go east, I think that will be a safety problem. And so I think that's something to, maybe double check with the transportation engineers, but I think it should be the transportation engineer that's going to sign off on this project. It should be their call, not the property owners or us, because we're not as qualified.
Sure.
To speak to both those points real quick, the cured in place piping, it's the same process we've done multiple years in the past, where we've let property owners know that between a certain set of hours, they wouldn't be able to use their sewer. And to my knowledge, I don't think we've ever had any issues. People have been very understanding. And then I do recall with the one-way road conversations with JUB's traffic engineers about it. And while I don't remember all the details, I do recall them saying that the safest action was for it to be westbound. So.
Councilmember Sherman?
So Robert just kind of touched on this, but I was remembering that we did the cured in place previously and we're still happy with those results, I would imagine.
Yes, to my knowledge, we haven't had any issue with any of the stretches that we've done in the past. They've been successful projects.
Thanks.
Councilmember Boyle?
No questions. Thanks for putting this together for us.
All right, council members, any other questions or comments? Okay, we do have two guests online. If any of the guests online would like to speak regarding this topic, please raise your hand. All right, thank you. We're going to move on then. Thank you, Alex. We really appreciate it.
You bet.
As
Thank you.
always. All right, you have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.
All right, next is a 2024 preliminary budget by Mr. Carlton.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, here we go again into another budget cycle. We did look at the revenues about a week ago. I think it was a week ago. And there was some questions about, in particular, was the sales tax. So since that time, I've gone through and completed a forecast for 2023 and did some comparisons off where we were in budget last year, which was used as the frame of reference for the initial revenue budget from last week. And we now have incorporated a forecast and use that forecast to use as our baseline for the 2024 budget. So we'll go through the slides. There's 13 slides. Try to keep this at a high level. It's the first pass through. We feel we're about 90%. We have a bit more work to do on some reconciling matters and some of the capital flow through and a few other items we'll touch base on. The first page here just guides us through what our budget process is. And we're still pretty early in the process, and you can see that by the end of October, we have to have our preliminary budget prepared with the budget message. And then we get into additional meetings, setting our property tax levies. That's on November 14th. Then we have we'll look at other parts of the budget. We'll present them to the public, available on November 15th. We'll have a potential finance committee review on the 22nd of November. And then we'll look at final changes to the budget at the beginning of December and bring the budget for adoption on December 12th. So only 2 months away. Next page, please. So again, our key assumptions that we go through when we're looking at our numbers. Of course, Mike and I met with all department heads about a month ago and reviewed all their input into their budget line items. We went through line item by line item detail. That's on the expenditure side. And then Mike and I, we look at the revenues and try to base those revenues off of what grants we're going to get, what loans, what capital projects are in his CFP. We look at trends in the revenue. There is information provided by the state MRSC on certain line items that they recommend, and we use those numbers. So part of our key assumptions, we try to take a conservative look at the revenues and expenditures and use also what the department heads have requested. We know it's important to maintain core services, investing in critical infrastructure, addressing any staffing gaps and competitive wages, and then continuing obtaining grants and funding opportunities. Next slide. Here's where we stand as of about 6 o'clock this evening. So our beginning fund balance based on the forecast I prepared, we're looking at a $20 million beginning fund balance, which is one of the highest fund balances that we've had as a city. For the next meeting, I'll prepare a slide which shows you that trend in the fund balance. We have revenues projected at just over $63 million, expenditures at slightly over $63.3 million, and an ending fund balance at $19.847 million. That is a drawdown of $249,472. Now, as you recall, last year when we were going through the budget, we've been accumulating money in our REIT funds, REIT 1 and 2. REIT 2 specifically for Alliance Park project, and we've accumulated approximately $1.6 million in that fund to go towards Alliance Park. So when you take that into account, so those funds have accumulated in the prior opening fund balance. So those revenues were already captured and in the bank. So we're going to use those funds to pay off part of our costs of the Alliance Park project. So there's no revenues recognized in the year to draw down a fund balance. So based on that, if we have $1.6 million in REIT to fund Alliance Park, our drawdown of $249,000, you net that, we're actually at a $1.2 million surplus. And then last year when we did the budget, we had forecasted a $1.4 million drawdown, and that was what was associated to Alliance Park. And this year in my forecast, I am showing a forecasted surplus of 2.1 million. So we're in good shape as far as our finances go. Next slide, please. Oh, man. That's hard to see. I'm sorry, there's a lot of information on there. All right.
Following along with you.
So I'll just touch on the major groupings. So under our current expense, which includes the current expense fund, our reserve, emergency reserve fund, technology reserve, and an employee benefit fund reserve. You can see that we're anticipating a surplus in those combination of funds of $117,000 and an ending fund balance of $3.7 million. You can see in the 001, the current expense, which is our main fund for operating police, fire, administration, parks, and also funds streets at a certain level. So we are showing a rather small surplus at that level. So we're going to look into the details of all the revenues and expenditures and see if we can improve that surplus. The next group of funds is our special revenue funds, which those funds that are accumulated in there are used for specific purposes. So this is pretty small dollars, but yet we're showing a surplus in that group of funds is $7,200 for an ending fund balance of $122,566. The next is one of our debt service funds that's outside of the utilities. This is our bond fund that was used to finance the College Place Avenue a number of years ago that we're still paying off, and I believe it expires in 2032, I believe. So that is funded out of current expense. And we basically just have to maintain enough money in there to cover the loan payments. The next group of funds is our capital reserve funds that are used for capital expenditures that are unrelated to the utilities. And you can see we do have that deficit in the current year of $1.5 million, and that is the one that is associated to Lions Park, and also in REIT 1, where we're going to be spending money on additional parks and road projects. But don't forget that we have been accumulating money for the last number of years in order to build up enough reserves to fund these projects. So that's the main impact there. Some other small changes in a few of the funds. The facilities maintenance reserve maintains a good balance at $772,000 and our equipment reserve fund at $201,000. There's a couple extra funds in there that you'll notice. The account 350, which is our TBD, our Transportation Benefit District, that you'll be asked to vote on soon, and also our Tax Increment Financing Fund. Currently, the projects that we're including in those funds are currently mixed into the capital on the appropriate utility. I have to move those out and put them into those specific funds. So those have to be set up within our system, and then we have to have coding for it and get it all situated. So the next meeting, those will be allocated to those, but it won't have a net impact on the bottom line. There's already, those costs and projects are already absorbed within the utilities. The next group of funds is the street fund. You can see that there's a number of projects going through. You can see the revenues in the fund 311, which is our street improvement fund. $7.28 million in revenues, and expenditures is 7.2. And those are all associated to what Mike has put into the CIP, and they tie out. So those are the projects that are slated for approval for next year. So we've included all the projects that are currently in the CIP, and they're reflected in this current iteration. On to the water funds. The water funds are the 400 series, and they're included the water, the capital funds, and then the debt funds. And the next meeting, I'll have the debt broken out. It was asked for in a prior meeting from Councilman Peterson, asked for a debt review. So we'll look at that the next cycle. You can see that overall the water fund is showing a surplus of $340,000, resulting in ending fund balance of $5.4 million. The wastewater funds are next. They're also grouped by operating, capital, and debt. You can see also there we are showing a $680,000 surplus for an ending fund balance of $7.4 million. That is a healthy balance, but then again, we're moving into the wastewater treatment plant project, and I'm sure we'll have some drawdown, or we'll be able to use some of those funds to either reduce a loan or help finance it on our own, so we're not extending that $13 million debt too far, because of course we're at, I think it's 50% approximately debt versus loan, or grant versus loan on that project. So, you know, we definitely have an opportunity to look at that and to reduce our debt load. The next group of funds is our stormwater fund, and you can see they're only showing a small increase. Last year, as you recall, we did a 0 increase in the rate for the stormwater. So it definitely impacts us not doing our increases. We have inflationary costs and wages, costs for operating the utility. So we're only showing, we are including a 3% increase in the stormwater for next year. That's currently included. And we're showing a surplus of $64,000 for an ending fund balance of just under $1 million. The ambulance utility fund, of course, you recall that was approved 2 years ago. Next year will be into our third year and 100% charge on the utility rate. So the revenues are increasing and we show a healthy fund balance of $628,000. Couple final, there's our equipment charge out fund, rental and equipment fund. It's showing a small surplus, but a good ending fund balance at 310,000. And then there's a small fund that's our flexible benefit fund. It's our fiduciary fund, which we pay towards the flexible benefit account. On to the next page. This is our reserved requirements according to our financial policies. And you can see I won't go through every single line, but in all cases but one, we're in excess of our targets. And the one is our expense reserve fund, which is our emergency fund, which historically our target has been 10%, but we're not required by RCW to make that. That it was strictly our goal. And although we're showing us having $691,000 in that emergency fund, as opposed to what our target of just over $1 million. So we have talked in past about increasing that, but you know, we're trying to get money in. We're forecasted to put $100,000 in for next year, and that's kind of what we've been doing, is put $100,000 in a year per year. So that's where we stand. On all other categories, we are in well excess of our financial policy reserve requirements. Next slide. Wow. So I just wanted to highlight some of the key items we took into account and some of the major components of each of the group of funds. Under current expense, we are showing an increase in community development fees of about approximately $115,000 attributed to development that's expected to occur next year. We have a developer bond deposits on some of those major projects of $1.3 million. We're showing a modest increase in sales tax of $94,000. We currently have in a recommendation for a 0% increase in the property taxes and forgo our 1%. Although really it only results in a reduction of $15,000 by not putting in the 1%, because the 1% is driven not off your assessed value, but off the revenue from the prior year that we got for the property taxes.
Ryan, Councilmember Peterson has a question.
Oh, yes.
So the last meeting we had, the sales tax discussion.
It was high.
Right. And so, no, yeah, I think this looks very reasonable. In other words, we were going off of budget projection and now we're going off of 23 annualized.
Yes.
In our comparison.
Yep.
And so that's brought that in line
down about 250,000 from what we originally had in there.
So it's a little bit less aggressive. Well, it could be the same number, but as far as comparing to 23, it's not quite as aggressive.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I have a detail of the revenues in a later slide.
Okay. Thank you.
We have included a request for 2 additional police officers. Also the COLA wage increases, which we'll get into the detail of that increase on the employee slide. We do have an increase in our facility costs of $65,000 with the hiring of a full-time facilities worker. Capital and internal transfers results in $822,000, and that's current expense responsibility for facilities maintenance and for IT costs. And then we have our technology reserve account. There's an additional $123,000 that's gone there because, as you recall, we're no longer using IEMSD, and we have a full-time IT analyst and a backup outside IT company, resulting in additional $123,000. Also included in here is our final expenditures on ARPA that we anticipate using in 2024, although we do have until 2026 to fully expend. Although I have heard at the WFOA conference a couple of weeks ago is that there's a potential that the federal government might try and claw back unused ARPA money before the end of 2026. So we have a balance of $451,000 left in unused ARPA. The total was $2.6 million. And then we have an additional cost of $100,000, which is for our continued Tyler implementation. And that's majority of that's going to our community development portion as they get into implementation early next year. On those capital reserves, there's our REIT expenditure. We have allotted $1.5 million towards the Lions Park and some road projects that affect the REIT funding. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we have our TBD and TIF funds that need to be handled within the budget. The street funds, there's large expenditure on street projects next year totaling $7.2 million funded by grants, TBD and the TIF. And then we've also included inflationary cost increases in the street operating costs. Water funds, again, mostly the increases in the operating costs relate to inflationary cost increases, and those are funded by our anticipated rate increases. Permit revenue is increasing due to anticipated development. Capital projects funded by loans and grants totals approximately $5.2 million. And we do have increase in debt costs by $325,000 to $1.3 million funded by utility charges. And the majority of that is related to the Southwest Sewer project that we have the USDA loan that's started in January, but will be full amount next year on the $2.8 million. And also the conversion of the Department of Ecology debt into loan, which we anticipate will be by the end of this year and the first payment due next year. Wastewater funds, again, inflationary cost increases covered by the rate increase. Also in there is permit revenue due to anticipated development. We do have total project costs for next year at $15.4 million funded by a combination of loans and grants. There is an impact in the wastewater funds of loan commitments that are not fully realized until project completion, and we're anticipating those next year, and those are also anticipated in the rate model. Debt service payments on Southwest Sewer project are increasing our debt service by $348,000, again expected to be covered by the rates. Stormwater funds, the stormwater fund did have in the rate models for 2022, they had a 5% increase in 2024. That has been included in the current revenues. We have COLA increases for wages and capital projects for the stormwater at $2.645 million funded by grant and as well as operating transfers. There's the information on the ambulance utility. Our rate is to 100%. We're anticipating an additional $154,000 in revenue next year. And our ambulance charges seem quite high this year at over $300,000, but historically they only average about, 175 to 250. So we took a conservative approach to that, and that's affected the fund by $142,000. Overall, we're expecting the ambulance utility to be up $209,000 in ending fund balance. Next slide. Here's the revenue that's been updated from the prior meeting. Really, the major impact to this one has been the sales tax. You can see we're only projecting for a $69,000 increase over the forecast for the 2024 budget. The property taxes, of course, we put in zero increase recommended for 2024. And the other numbers are the same as what was presented a couple of weeks ago or a week ago. Next slide is the staffing for next year. Currently, we're at 62 budgeted full-time employees. We have 0.4 EFT police records clerk and an intern that will be hired that we currently don't have, that will be hired, I think, this week. The positions that we are requesting for approval for next year are a water utility worker, a public works project manager, and 2 police officers. And currently those positions are included in the budget expenditures. As far as wage and benefit information for next year, the police is included at a 5% increase, which was the negotiated percentage based on the contract from last year. Currently, the fire is in negotiations, and we don't know what that increase will be at this point in time. The public employees at 3.7, same for non-union exempt and non-exempt employees. Sergeants are under the same contract as the police at a 5%. And then our contract employees, of which we have 3, theirs is based on CIP at the end of September. That number is, I think, was available maybe this week, but we used the August number at 3.7 and don't feel that it will vary substantially. As far as health increases, currently we don't have the estimates for the police. All other employees, the only information, we have the information, the health is going up 4.1% and no increase in the other coverages. Our light flight employee benefit that you approved to be paid by the city last year has gone up slightly to $65 per employee per year for a total of $6,500. Next slide. I just wanted to put in Mike's summary of our capital projects that we've incorporated into the budget. And currently we sit at a capital facility plan amount of $33.2 million next year. A majority of that in a couple areas. Parks, of course, we know that's Lions Park. Majority, large number of the street projects that are being included at 7.3, and of course our wastewater at $11 million next year. Next slide. This is our equipment replacement plan, and you can see our total that has been incorporated into the budget for next year is just under $1.9 million. Next slide. And this is our IT budget for next year. We're anticipating our IT to be at $480,000. There's a large amount in finance at $291,000, but that does include the one-time implementation cost of Tyler, which we're estimating at $100,000 next year. which should wrap us up. We should be complete on a majority of the financial components by the end of this year. And there's two that are scheduled for implementation next year, and that's asset management and the community development. Next slide. So the next steps for finance are we have to make sure we're fully reconciled on our inter-fund transfers. We need to review our capital requirements and funding options to make sure we have that all firmed up. We'll go through line by line item and look at all the revenues and costs for any potential discrepancies that we can't explain. And we need to complete the setup of the new funds for TIF and TBD. And for your reading enjoyment, the entire budget is included in your packets, so you can review the lines. And if you have any questions, we're here to answer.
All right, let's go to council members for any questions or comments. Councilmember Jessup.
Thank you. I've been looking for some light evening reading before bed, so I appreciate that very much. I had a couple of quick questions. 35,000 foot level. I have a funny feeling I know the answer to this, but is there a primary factor or factors that kind of led us to having the ending balance the way it is, or having a surplus, if you will? Is there something that we or staff from whatever policy level, 30,000 foot level, that's been kind of helped that?
Well, more so the fact that we look at what the total revenues and total expenditures are each year and let the fund balance reflect where we're at. Of course, our goal is to have a net, surplus in each fund each year.
Sure.
And just historically in the utilities, you can definitely see there's a lot of money sitting in their ending fund balance, but we are anticipating using that money at some level in future years. Funding dries up, we don't get the loans and grants, then we have to do a project. We're going to rely on that fund balance to get us through.
So in essence, it's the grant money and the loans that kind of fluctuate.
Those have had a big impact on not
Kind of
having
on the
to use
upswing
our
of that.
reserves to fund those projects.
Okay, so yeah, that's a big piece, is that grant money, upswing from that. For the grant money coming in from the state and federal is kind of matching the projects we need, but that can also go down.
Right.
Okay,
I think it might be Keynesian economics.
yeah,
Keynesian?
yeah,
Right?
yeah, give us the money, we'll spend it, yeah. Yeah. In the budget items, you said we're next to 2024. One of the things is 2 police officers. Is that in addition to the 2 from this year, or is that what the 2 are?
Mike, can you?
Yeah, so this would be 2 additional, because going back some years ago, there was a staffing plan between departments as revenues, people, and service levels grow, and that was the next ones up. So therefore, you see the 2 additional, and then the newer ones, in addition to that, is mainly because of changing environment. So the water workers, because our longtime worker Randy Reese retired, and trying to keep up's a bit of an issue because we have newer folks now, so we really need another one. And then the project managers directly ties to the grants. With the amount of grant money we're given, Robert's about ready to go postal with the amount of money. So we really need someone to really help manage some of these projects that are getting teed up for fruition here, because a lot of them are coming together at the same time, which is causing workload issues.
Well, yeah, Alex is saying you got 10 years worth of sewage going in 1 year, for example. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is a funny question, I would imagine, depending on your perspective, how this could be received. Being ignorant on how it necessarily works, it seems that when new projects and the basin disposal came and so on and so forth, we've kind of incurred, the citizens kind of incur the cost little ways over time. Is there ever a point where you get to in your budget or so on and so forth where that trend kind of goes halt or backwards? Like, for example, I know that as a council, we kind of said, hey, put a stop or no increase in property taxes, as an example. But is there ever a time in city budgeting that it doesn't continue to, the citizens incur that cost in little ways, or does it ever go in the other direction? You know what I'm saying? Like, instead of increase 3%, 2%, 3%, 2%, more tax, 3%, 2%, does it ever go, okay, this year, we're not going to incur a 3% adage to the utility tax. We're actually going to take that 3% back off so that the citizens can have a little bit of, you know what I mean? Instead of ever increasing, is it ever stop or go backwards?
Well, you could look at it. Do you see inflation ever going back? So we're definitely incurring additional costs, and those costs have to be supported. So part of the increase is related to those inflationary costs. If you're paying your employees COLAs, then you have to absorb that COLA somewhere.
Indeed, but normal citizens don't get grant money either. So whenever there's an increase in budget income for grant money and so on and so forth, when on these upswings like this, is there ever a time where the citizens can see their utilities or whatever, however that looks in the budget items over the years? If we're on the upswing, like I said, depends on your perspective of how this is being received.
Yeah,
but you know what I mean?
Yes, I think there is. And the issue is right now in wastewater, we're looking at spending, out of a loan money, $13 million on wastewater treatment plant. And those are in the rate model, which show we need those small little incremental increases now to make sure we have enough money to fund the debt service on those loans. And similar in water, we also have to, we've had 2 water wells go out, and we've had to replace those at the tune of $6 million a piece in the last 3 years. And then looking for future wells. So in order to support that infrastructure, you have to spend the money.
Does it ever help if you have more, say, for example, citizens in housing? Does that then kind of overall reduce in terms of the tide rising and falling for everybody?
Economies of scale.
Yeah.
But, our population hasn't grown significantly for quite a while, but.
Yeah, I mean, right now, we're basically hovering just shy of like 1% population growth. With the newer developments we're teeing up, we hope to accelerate that. As far as holding rates in check and stuff, and I've said this all along for a number of years, really what plays into a lot of this is that we're playing catch up. If you look at the various iterations of the CFPs, you'll see that. In fact, most jurisdictions our size was doing a stormwater program. I mean, when I started my career back in Urbana, they were doing that 15 years ago. And I mean, at the time, the city somehow was underneath that county stormwater permit, but you have to pay the piper at some point. And when the state issued that letter, then we had to catch up on a boatload of deferred infrastructure. And you really see that across the utilities, for example. So with the water system, and we touched this when we did the CFP review during our workshop, the water towers like from the 1940s, and we've done maintenance inside but not out. And when we had that water outage about a year ago, we learned that we did not have the supplies we thought we had for storage, because you really should be having additional storage. So really you're in a period of playing catch up, and luckily we've used the grant funds to try to minimize that impact to the ratepayer taxpayer. But at at the end of the day, that does come at a cost because of those periods where we're sitting on our hands.
Yeah, and you have no income, yeah.
And I mean, the transportation benefit's a good case in point because I can't tell you how many times over the years I'll have people approach, oh, the chip seal's horrible. And why don't we get a sidewalk here, a sidewalk there? Well, we federally classify the roads we can, but when you don't touch something, you put, like when we did Sixth, that ended up being about 6 layers of chip seal on dirt. At some point you hit a critical mass, and I think that's where we're at. So it gets to a point where either you can do gentle increases over time, which we try and moderate. So
Right.
what you'll
I've
see
seen that, yeah.
what you'll see in this rendition is that, for instance, with the transportation benefit district, since really historically we've basically been pulling funds out of recurring expense to try to prop up streets, since on this forecast we were taking into account, hopefully knock on wood, you'll vote for a transportation benefit district in which people visiting here and doing business here would pay that
To
sales tax.
defer the cost of the citizens, yeah.
That was why we ended up recommending a 0% property tax increase to try to balance the fulcrum, if you will. So it really becomes about trying to moderate it. But if you don't do that, and let's say you try to stay at 0% and regress too quickly, then you could end up in a situation like where you're from, where I'm from, back in the Midwest. You pretend to do that, and then you end up with a 25% increase in one
All at
year
one time, right.
because of kicking the can down the road. I
Right.
mean, that's the Illinois special right there. So yeah.
I think you guys have done a great job, and and only been here a couple of years only. Like, I've appreciated that very much, and just kind of seeing how it works over the long haul, over the long term, and that type of thing. So thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Cleveland.
No questions. Thanks for all the hard work as you're getting to finalize this.
Councilmember Espinosa.
Yeah, just want to make a couple comments. After looking at the forecast, I think is pretty conservative based on the economic conditions that we're in. We are in just strange times. We look at the indicators with unemployment, with interest rates being high. And so we don't know what next year is going to hold. So looking at this, to me, is very conservative, and I feel comfortable with a model like this. So I appreciate that. The second comment that I'd like to make is the city, I think, is doing something to help its citizens. And I think you can see that reflected on the property taxes. I know we're making an effort not to increase the property taxes. When we look at inflation, inflation is going up, but we're trying to keep those costs down. And so that's a huge effort that the city is making, and that's going to reflect on the citizens' discretionary income, or the cash, the payments that they end up with at the end of the month. All of us got our assessment recently, and I don't know about yours, but mine jumped 100,000. So I think a lot of citizens are feeling pressure from other areas where their taxes are getting increased, and they're just, the cost of owning a property and the cost of living is going up. So I appreciate our council doing everything it can to keep those costs down for our citizens. And I think that's really good for our community to see.
Thank you. I thought it was just me that got that crazy assessment.
My house went up 35,000, and if you see where I live, it's not that big of a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, I was shocked. Councilmember Peterson.
So you guys won't know what the fund balance is for 24 for a while. I mean, we looked at the 23, what's that? 24 next year.
Oh,
Ending, beginning, yeah.
The forecast on the 23 forecast, we won't know that until probably February, March, when the actual numbers are.
And I'm not trying to, yeah, I know that. That's kind of what I was trying to say there. So should we expect a significant fluctuation in fund balance for 24 based on the projects, the park and whatnot. And so these are non-operating expense, but these are capital funds. I was just trying to gauge, not that that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? Because if we've got the funds set up and we spend them, we're going to have a reduction in that fund balance. Or are those funds actually flowing in to offset that with the REIT and others that where we wouldn't anticipate that large of a fluctuation in the fund balance?
The ones which you see a drawdown in the fund balance is actually cash you're taking out of your bank. So it's not any money that's flowing in. So you're getting you've already got the revenue.
We've already got
from years ago.
Yeah.
We've just accumulated it in that savings account to use it now.
So there's no significant items coming in for the park and whatnot. We're kind of status quo as far as those balances. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was looking at that because there's such a small change for this year. And then I was, are we going to have a $6 million swing or something next year or not? But probably, yeah.
No,
but we don't know.
No,
and
we shouldn't.
No, yeah, probably not. But
unless something's catastrophic happens, then.
Or we decide to spend the funds on a capital project prematurely or something like that.
Yeah, decide not to, to use more of our own reserves as opposed to getting a loan.
Sure.
I mean, you're going to take the grant as much as you can.
Sure.
That's free money, but you could reduce your debt load.
Yeah. So it's kind of a broad question. I don't think we're going to see a surprise there. We'll see how it ends up.
Yeah. And I'll have that debt schedule for the next presentation.
Yeah. Okay. And then real quick, the paper had something about the land, this is a small amount, I think, but the landfill rates were adjusted by the city of Walla. Is that correct? Just in the last week or so? Was that amount a surprise or what was expected, or does that, we're tied into basin disposal. I was just wondering if that was going to come back on us or.
Well, so actually we aren't exactly tied into that landfill. So if you recall the last time we did the contract with basin disposal, so historically we were, but a couple of years ago, we did put language in the contract that if they could find a cheaper place to put it, that we had that option to. So basin disposal can be looking around in essence and essentially review that, if you will. So they are doing that.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, so your point, they could come back to could they come back and say this is something?
So in the contract, the rate model that they were going over with you, they included what city of Walla Walla, what they thought was proposing at the time. What they ended up passing is a little bit higher than that, but as I previously said, we did put in the mobility into that contract to, for instance, look at that like giant Arlington landfill in Oregon. So I know they are doing that. So I believe with doing that, we'll be able to keep it like right where they were looking at it. That we definitely are not honed into just the Walla Walla landfill.
Thanks, Mike.
Councilmember Williams.
I'm sorry, I have a list. So I was a little bit confused when we talked about the 2.1 million surplus. Is that money earmarked? So it would include like money that's earmarked for the park, et cetera, or is that unearmarked?
It would be part of that carry forward.
Okay. So
It'd be
it's
more concerning if that was not $2.1 million deficit, or if it was a deficit at the end of the year.
Yeah, I'm just wondering things like often it seems like if you have like personnel positions that are vacant for a while or something, you end up with a surplus that then you can use on one-time projects. And so I wasn't clear if that's what that surplus was or if that was just
a combination of all funds
budget
and
surplus. Okay, so it's just
total fund for the city.
Okay.
That's what I forecasted. We'll see if that, like Lauren had mentioned, that we'll see what the actual fund balance turns out at the end of the year, and how accurate I am.
So the surplus just means that's money we didn't spend this year. So it's separate from the fund balances. So like by putting over the 1.7 for the Lions Park, that would be the lion's share, pun intended, of the 2.1 million.
No, that actual forecast is actually the difference between our revenues and expenditures for the year. It's the surplus. So we have.
Okay, I see.
It's that money we've accumulated in the REIT funds is actually in that opening fund balance. It's in that.
Okay,
It's in that $19 million bucket. The 2.1 forecasted for 2023 is actually surplus of revenues less expenditures for the year.
okay. So that's going to increase fund balances?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I was just confused about exactly what that was. And then when we get 2 new police officers, are they going to need new vehicles, and is that budgeted in?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And just out of curiosity, I noticed that the forfeited proceeds fund, it doesn't increase much, but what is it earmarked for?
It has to go towards police activities, forfeited proceeds fund.
It's police activities and such.
Okay, I was just curious. One of the organizations that I'm a member of ended up firing their director, et cetera, because they forgot to budget for their IT subscriptions and ended up like massive fundraising needed. So like you put in a new system and oh yeah, it's all this money, but then, oh yeah, but every year you have a subscription fee. So I'm assuming that our IT costs includes the subscriptions. Just double checking.
Yeah, so if you look at the 6-year IT plan, you'll see it's all extrapolated.
Okay, good.
You know, I can understand that with all the subscriptions that I probably am signed up to and not remembering.
Yeah, I mean, like about twice a year, I literally go through my, this is where all my money went and go, wait a minute, I'm still subscribed to that. And, so yeah.
One thing that
Keep
we
on
did
top of it.
differently this year in this budget cycle is we talked to each department, and for instance, like board docs was funded through the clerk's budget, and we pulled out various different parts of all of the programs that we use and put them in the IT budget so that we have a total amount of what we're spending on software and everything, and that includes the annual maintenance costs for those.
Awesome.
Workshop, I believe.
Thank you. And I know we're kind of budgeting based on getting some additional street funds through the transportation benefit district. I'm like, transportation TBD. Will that include more money for snow removal? That is one of the things that I have gotten so many complaints about, is that we just do not have enough snow removal going on.
So what I will say, so transportation benefit district money that historically is used for capital or fixing roads. However, because we now have the TBD, that lessens the burden on the current expense streets. So you can shuffle things around, if you will, and be propping up money to help with the snow removal. And if you look at the equipment replacement plan, you will see that we have proposals in there to actually get liquid de-icer finally and get more on par with what some of our neighboring jurisdictions do.
Great, because yeah, I don't know exactly what we need, but I know that every time it snowed last year, I got yelled at. So,
Making the snow?
Apparently I'm the one they're like, you're on the city council. How come they haven't plowed my street?
Sorry, I didn't mean to send them all to you.
These are just my coworkers.
Well,
I don't dare walk down the street.
yeah. Well, and I just want to put it out there, because this is where I get a lot of complaints from. There's also a big portion of streets that are private HOAs and they're supposed to be doing it, like the cul-de-sacs off of Northwest B Street, the entirety of Villages of Garrison Creek, and then Whitman PUD by Kiwanis Park, just to name a couple. So
That's a good reminder. I will ask next time somebody's complaining where exactly they live. And then what my final thing is basically a comment sort of, I'll say what I think I know, and then you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. From what I understand, Washington's tax structure for cities has gotten very strange over the years. And basically, usually residential developments end up costing more in services than they pay in taxes. And the only way cities can really balance their budgets is by bringing in businesses with the sales tax, essentially. Is that more or less correct?
I would say that's a fair assessment. So like, for instance, in Oregon, because it's income tax, they don't really try and market to like businesses or anything because it doesn't really matter. They don't do the sales tax. But here, you really live or die by the sales tax. But you need a lot of residential. Otherwise, you end up in a situation like we currently are where there aren't really enough homes and then people are commuting from all over the place. But that's why it's such a concerted effort to tee up our commercial lands, because the sales tax is what pays the bills around here. Most other states have a lot more of a progressive tax structure where it's a little bit all over the place, but then lower. But unfortunately, that's the cards were dealt.
That's what I was thinking. So yes, in terms of affordable housing, we obviously need more housing, but that's not going to solve our budget problems. So, okay, thank you. That's my whole list.
That's all.
That's all.
One follow-up to the snow removal. Michael, are acquiring more vehicles with plows also than I think we've ever had in the past. I think I think of the dump truck. I'm thinking of a few. There's another vehicle I think we're either bought or we're going to buy that would assist in the snow removal also.
Have an attachment.
Yeah. So you'll see an equipment replacement plan. We have several plow attachments, and we're getting newer vehicles that can accommodate that, because historically we did not have that. But I mean, really, that's why when a couple years back we basically had a 78 grader, a backhoe, and a truck, and that was it. So we're starting to change the tide on that.
Councilmember Sherman.
I don't have any questions. I think this is looking really good. Thank you for all your work.
Councilmember Boyle.
Yeah, I echo Heather's comments. Given what our economy and everything looks like these days, trying to forecast what things are going to look like for the next year is not an easy task. So thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Shoot, that was round one.
3 more to go.
Okay. Next is we have one public hearing on the agenda tonight, and Mr. Rickard's going to present on that.
Good evening. So this is part of the Martin Airfield annexation. Because our comprehensive plan did not, this property is in our urban growth area, we did not, in our comprehensive plan, assign it a land use other than a small portion up on the bluff as urban residential. So as part of this annexation process, we have to assign zoning, and we would typically look to our comprehensive plan. Because we didn't have it in our comprehensive plan, the state laws require that we hold 2 public hearings on what the proposed zoning should be for the annexation area. So we had our first public hearing on July 11th for the zoning. The proposal is to zone 91 acres of the land as single family residential. And if Sherry, if you could pull up that zoning map. And then we would zone the remainder of the 234 acres, which is 143 acres, as light industrial. And so that's basically the split is falling along the creek, Doan Creek. So south of Doan Creek essentially is the residential and north is the light industrial. So the northern part is primarily all of the airport property, the airstrip, and their outbuildings. Part of the annexation process is to notify the surrounding properties within 300 feet. There were 95 properties notified, both prior to the July hearing. And then again, we provided notice on September 26th by a mailing and posting the site to the proper 95 properties surrounding the site. There are 2 properties within the annexation and zoning area that are included and affected by this, and that's the Henshaw and the Johnson property. There are residences within the area. We had to do an environmental review on the annexation area. The city completed a SEPA checklist, posted that to state agencies and on the SEPA register, and we issued a determination of non-significance. That's all I have on the rezone information to provide to you. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. And then following those questions, we should hold the public hearing, the second hearing.
Councilmember Jessup, questions or comments?
No, but thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland,
No questions?
Councilmember Espinosa,
No questions.
Councilmember Peterson.
So the zoning to light industrial housing within that area, how is that?
The housing is all south of the creek. So the
Any new
residences,
housing, I'm sorry.
well, the new housing,
Potential new housing.
potential new housing would be south of the creek, but there are a couple of properties in there that would have the residential zoning that are part.
Grandfathered, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, okay, thanks.
Councilmember Williams,
No questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Sherman,
No questions.
Councilmember Boyle.
No questions, thanks.
All right, so we have no further questions or comments at this time. I open the public hearing. Sherry, did anyone submit a comment in advance?
I did not receive any comments.
Okay, we have no one in the lobby in attendance. So if there's anyone in virtual attendance who would like to speak, please raise your hand now. If you're connected by phone, *9 will raise your hand. No one? Okay. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, is there a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second. Councilmember Williams.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. The ayes have it and the hearing is closed. All right, John, we're going to move on to the action item on the agenda, which is the Martin Airport annexation.
Okay, thank you. So the applicant was Martin Airport LLC. The annexation area proposed was 234.69 acres. It's within our urban growth area, as I stated before. There are 3 parcels as part of the annexation request that are owned by the applicant, and then 2 additional parcels proposed to be included, which are 397 Martinfield Drive and 1827 West Whitman Drive. The method of annexation is the 60% petition annexation method, whereby if the annexation proposal area must have at least 60% of the assessed valuation in order to include other properties that may not desire to be within that annexation area. As part of the annexation process, the council met our first meeting, and it was decided back in May on the 23rd that the council would include those two parcels in the annexation area, at least in terms of conceptualizing and going through the process. The zoning, we just went through that process. And so the zoning would be assigned a light industrial north of the creek at that 91 acres, and then residential 91 acres for the single family residential and 143 acres for the light industrial. Public hearing date was set for July 11th. So we already held the public hearing portion of this. At that time, we received public comments, written comments from the College Place School District, notifying the city that they were interested in the city considering what's the term I'm thinking of, Mike? Assessments.
The school impact
fees. Thank you. Yes. So as development occurs out in this area, they would like the city at some point to consider impact fees those dollars would go to schools. And then, of course, there were the Hinshaws, who are residents within the development or within the proposed annexation area, and the Johnsons also commented on their residents within the annexation area. That really, public notice was provided back in June prior to the hearing. The hearing was held on the 11th, as I mentioned earlier. So I don't have any additional information to add at this time.
All right, we're going to go to council members again for any questions or comments. Councilmember Jessup.
No, but thank you again.
Councilmember Cleveland.
No questions.
Councilmember Espinosa.
No questions.
Councilmember Peterson.
No questions.
Councilmember Williams.
Looking at the map and the people who commented, were any of the property owners that are included in this opposed to the annexation?
They were not on board with them being included in the annexation area.
So there were some that
Yes,
in there that are not.
both property, the Hinshaws and the Johnsons.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Sherman.
No questions.
Councilmember Boyle.
No questions. Thanks.
All right, if there's no other questions or comments in any additional discussion, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 23-011 to annex certain property known as Martin Airfield, including contiguous properties, into the municipal boundaries of the city of College Place.
Second.
Perfect. We have a first and a second. Any additional discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it and the motion is passed. Thank you, John. All right, let's see, administrative reports. There's 4 administrative reports on the agenda, and Mr. Rizzatello will present the draft fiscal year 2024 state and federal legislative agenda.
Don't worry, the next 4 items, I'm just going to summarize it since we read verbatim at least the last meeting. So the state and federal legislative agenda, it's needed because we're getting a budget time for federal and then also at the state level. So the key points on each of these is you have your legislative asks for basically capital project money from State Department of Commerce at state level, and then congressionally directed spending or earmarks at the federal level. So what you'll see on each of these is that with the state legislative agenda, we'll have the totality of each project. With the federal legislative agenda, when you look at the priorities, you'll see a total cost, but then you'll see an ask, mainly because a lot of the staff in DC don't really read all of it. They just want to know what you're hitting them up for. So you have to put it in bold. So So the big priorities is from the water system element, the additional well, because all the wells we've been talking about over years, we're basically netting out at where we were when I first started 7 years ago because of the 2 wells that really aren't working. But now we got those, the new ones going, but we do need an additional because of growth and projected growth from that time frame. Also, an additional water tower as well. So that's asked there. The community center, there's earmarked money at play for that, but we want to go to TIL for additional dollars because, as mentioned at the last workshop, there's starting to be a concept coalescing of a combination of childcare commercial kitchen and the library branch locating into a multi-purpose facility. So we're trying to get that going. Then the replacement police department, right now we're doing a facilities analysis. So we'll have more concrete numbers tied to that as that study matures. But just keep in mind the existing police department building. Now, at one point in time, that was a residential apartment and an automotive mechanic shop. So that wasn't really like designed for law enforcement related things. Then roadway project wise, since we basically have Majanier Road fully tied out, we need to put another road project in there. So 12th Street, starting to get that going. From the state side, the key stuff is just trying to enhance and protect the grant programs we get money for. And then also with downtown Main Street associations, we're actually running a bill where one Main Street group could essentially serve 2 downtowns because we have businesses that are in both, and then because they don't want to be on another board, that's how we end up never having a downtown group here, and then we're shortchanged out of B&O tax money, so that would go and fix that. And then a lot of your standard fare in the other items on the state legislative agenda that we've talked about in past years. Federal legislative agenda, big one is phase 8 of Highway 12. And then the other big one, which I recently found out about, is getting this area of Washington added for authority under Section 219 of the Army Corps program. Because if we were added into that, you could essentially get water and wastewater projects 75% funded by the Army Corps. And for some reason, when they ran the bill a couple of years ago, some sort of snafu occurred where Western Washington was added into the authorization, so the I-5 corridor, and then Eastern Washington was just left out of it. So that is a pretty big issue. And then a lot of similar language to past years and other elements. And the other big thing that was added was just some additional planning for State Route 125, because in the future, the state has indicated wanting to do newer treatments at intersections, but trying to understand where they're coming around for that, and then also timeline, because that's delaying other investments on neighboring properties, so they need to get up to date on that. But that basically covers the key salient points there. On the federal one, we kept Majanier on the federal one, mainly because we're very close to the appropriation going through, but again, just being cautious before the I's are dotted. So that's why we have it on the federal one. But we believe, it ended up in the final budget out of Representative McMorris Rogers' office. So we seem good to go there. But that is the key stuff on the 2 items. We're recommending that this would basically go through at the early November meeting, so we have time to get in front of everyone before session opens up. Questions?
All right. Any questions or comments?
No, thank you.
None? None? Okay. Thank you, Mike. We're going to move on then to your let me see which one am I on? I want to make sure I don't skip over one. The capital facilities plan.
So you're all well aware of this over the number of years we've done this. So first year's more concrete, other years are for planning purposes out, and items are ranked high, medium, and low. And because we have that prioritization built in, that's how we've been able to like avoid layoffs or things like during COVID, for example, because we have that mobility. The key thing to know, just because again, for those that aren't well aware of the process, the aggregate number seems really high. I think the important thing to note on the 6-year element of this plan is that over 59.4% of this is paid for either with grant money or developer contributions. So that's a pretty big bang for the buck of outside money going in there. And then the key projects next year, which Brian just touched at length, is wastewater treatment plant, beginning the filter part of it. Lions Park, we're finally getting to the finish line on the other after every federal agency known has reviewed all of it. Southwest Majania Road, same thing. Engineering is getting near 100%. There'll be a public house, open house on that soon. And then we're going to get to some right-of-way acquisition, getting that teed up, ready to go. And then the Decant facility for stormwater, lift station 5, which we just went over. And then the drinking water well on number 7 are the big ones. And then keep in mind when you look at the streets budget, you'll notice that the block replacement schedule item and then the Safe Walk program was dramatically increased, and that's predicated on the concept of the transportation benefit district passing. So basically 1 or 2 road projects would get into construction phase and 1 or 2 would go into engineering phase each year. And then because of some match money that represents, we're then able to get some Department of Transportation complete streets money they've recently created for local roads. And then for the low income block groups around College Avenue, that would actually get us in line for the state community development block grant money, because we've had issues on streets where the university doesn't have property of actually getting match money. The only roads we've been able to get with CDBG money is roads where the university has property, because then they've donated it to us and then that actually counted as the match. But we're starting to run out of those. So yeah, that's an issue. So yeah, read the document, if you will. It's the spreadsheet's about 5-6 pages. The booklet itself is 82 pages. I will couch that there. Any questions?
Questions or comments, anyone? No, we're on like page 64. Okay. All right, Mike, let's move on to the, wait, we just did the equipment, right?
No.
Okay, to the equipment replacement plan.
Okay, so equipment replacement plan, same general concept, and because we've been good at replacing items, and again, we've been catching up on deferments. You'll notice this year that there's no planned additional equipment for parks or storm. So again, that's because of the grants and storm, and then with parks, just the appropriate planning for it. And you'll be able to see the split for fiscal year 2024. Lion's share goes to police, followed by fire, and then streets. And then 2024 to 2029 takes a similar flavor. And you'll see in the streets department, a lot of it is starting to tie to the whole snow removal issue. So you'll see a lot of equipment there for that. And then fire department, just in subsequent years, change out the ambulances because they run a lot. I mean, our call volume here is pretty close to like what Pullman Pullman gets, even though it's like the combination volunteer department and they're full time. So in Pullman, so that's a big issue. And then with police department, we're starting to do a cost benefit analysis of the leases versus outright buying, because it made perfect sense when the supply chain wasn't what it was to go lease. But now we're having issues of the cars actually making it here because of some outfitting issues. And then also when we're months out from giving them, not being them trying to fight back on the recapture of like, hey, we haven't gotten them in time, so you should give us additional months. So it's becoming a bigger issue. So we're really doing an evaluation of that with the new positions in the budget. You'll see we have some vehicle purchases in there. But I just want to put it out there that we're trying to do the cost benefit analysis of what makes sense, because the economics of the situation have changed dramatically from what it was when the decision was made way back when. Any questions?
Questions or comments regarding equipment? Sorry, I was going to say facilities, of course. Nothing.
Nope.
All right, Mike, you're moving right along.
Yep.
Let's do the information technology plan.
Okay, thank you. Same general concept of the ranking schedule. I will call the attention to page 7 in the booklet. I think that's very interesting, where it has the IT expense timeline. And what you'll see is that in 2023, as we were moving to Tyler and then doing the initial software change outs, that's where it reached the highest amount, just because when you're doing those change outs, you also have to pay the maintenance on the legacy software so you can keep your data. Now, as we're getting on the other side of that, you'll see that it's starting on the decline toward the normal amount, if you will, of expenditure. And really, a lot of this is just getting Tyler up to where it's serving all the departments, and then the software maintenance on everything that is annual costs, so making sure to account for that across the organization. But we're on our computer replacement schedule. In many ways, we've saved money because we've predicted over the years that the security cameras would be paid by the forfeited proceeds account. And to date, every camera we've gotten the Wild Horse Casino Foundation's like footed that. So we're actually pretty far ahead in that element. So yeah, nothing too dramatic. Just in PD, the rugged laptops need to be changed out. They're at their useful life, so that is a big expenditure. And then also change out the server here, because again, time goes by quick. And believe it or not, the server, we changed that out when I first got here, and we are now at the end of useful life on that, where it's past the maintenance. Time goes by quick. So that encapsulates the IT plan. Is there any questions on that?
I have.
Okay, sorry, Councilmember Peterson has a question.
Not a question, there's a comment. Just, I think at this time each year, we kind of make a statement that Mike has just gone through this rather quickly, but at the last workshop, we spent an exhaustive, detailed amount of time going through each line item of this. And so there were detailed discussions that have gone on that are, not reflected in a normal workshop, or excuse me, normal meeting. So there. Yep.
Councilmember Williams.
A couple of comments. One, although the server that we did when you first came in, maybe at the end of its useful life, you clearly are not. So really appreciate that. And we're really starting to see the benefits of putting in an actual plan for replacement and paying into it. And it's really improved. I would appreciate, I see that they're listed out under each department, but on page 9, you have a great little pie chart that shows the expenditures by department.
Yeah.
I would find it helpful to also have a pie chart that shows the expenditures of like equipment versus subscriptions versus staff to fix it, all the different tasks,
Okay,
you know, and break it up by that.
okay.
I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Mike. We appreciate it. Okay, let's see. So that's all of those. There's no informational reports. We do not have an executive session. We're now down to closing items. Councilmember Sherman?
Oh, I just had some comments under the good of the order, if that's okay. 2-1, thank you, Sherry, for saving our lives with the Halloween treats. Thank you so much. Yeah. And then I was wondering if we could talk about the workshop on November 7 about maybe not or rescheduling it since that's election night.
Any items that would have occurred during that could either be moved to the October 26th or the next November meeting. And we're already a little bit ahead of the 8 ball with the 6-year plan, so that wouldn't be earth shattering. I just move any items to the meetings and bookended on either side.
Are you worried? Are you worried you might not be reelected?
You never know. No, I have other friends on the ballot. So I know that I'll be watching.
I was gonna say, I don't think any of us are opposed, right?
To be in support of Heather's comment, we've noticed in the past that when we have meetings on election night,
We're not paying attention.
the council members are distracted.
Yes, exactly.
No, just teasing.
Was
them.
that distracted or just?
Yes.
We're distracting to the election.
Yeah, I guess I would like to say that I appreciate that we can even have that discussion and probably see it on the agenda at the next meeting, but I would like it to be part of the conversation going forward because presidential elections are even worse for keeping our attention during those nights. And it's just really tricky. So I don't want it to be a surprise as Brian's planning budget calendar of like, oh no, we need to have that meeting. So that'd be great.
That's a really good point. It should be standard. Yeah, good point. Okay, I do want to thank Councilmember Sherman for attending the audit meeting that we had. Well, I know it takes time during the day. We do appreciate you.
And for attending tonight, you're welcome.
Well, tonight, all the day. All right. Any other, seriously, I do appreciate you always show up for those.
No, I think they're great. I feel like I get to know the auditors.
So thank you. Any other business for good of the order? All right. Do we have a motion to conclude?
I move we conclude the meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. If there's no objections, the meeting is concluded at 8:56 p.m. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.